Well, as I look forward to the agenda that we have this afternoon, the next thing that's on our agenda is a special plenary session on life transformative education at the University of Connecticut. And since one of our steering committee members, Tom Katsouleas, is the recently stepped down president of the University of Connecticut, we've asked him to help introduce that position. By the way, Tom is an amazing guy that we have known for a long time. He was formerly the Dean of Engineering at Duke, and he was the provost at the University of Virginia. And everywhere he goes, there's a legacy of new ideas that still lives on today. So Tom, will you take it from here?
Absolutely. Thank you, Rick. It is my great honor to introduce an incredibly talented and dedicated team at the University of Connecticut. They are Professor Michael Bradford, Vice Provost for Faculty, Staff, and Student Development, who will kick off the presentation, but also participating in the discussion section will be Dr. Jennifer Lee Sputz, Assistant Vice Provost for Enrichment Programs and Director of the Honors Program. You can unmute and wave as I introduce you, so maybe people can see you. Dr. Sarah Croucher, Director of Academic Policy and Faculty Affairs. Professor Tom Scheinfeld, Professor of Digital Media and Design. And I believe we might have our incredibly talented Provost, Carl Lejwe, maybe joining as well. I just introduced this by saying when I arrived as president at the University of Connecticut, I observed there was a tremendous commitment to student success and quality of student experiences. The honors program was well known, and many other programs were providing the kinds of connections between curriculum and authentic problems, along with more supportive mentoring that correlate with life transformation. So my role as president was simply to pose the question, the grand challenge really, to ask the faculty and staff, how can we ensure that those kinds of experiences reach every student at the scale of 24,000? And this is the group that had the courage to step up and try to provide the answer. So I think you're going to hear about how they are approaching the challenge and building support from the top down and to the grassroots level. And so before I turn it over to Michael, I want to share a quote from him that really excited me. And he wrote, "Wouldn't it be great if in 5 years, everyone working at UConn responded to the question, 'Why are you here?' with the same answer, 'We're here to transform lives.'" I love it. Michael, please take it away.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's really great to be with you. Before I start, I just want to point out in the ever widening concentric circles that we are trying to engage in this initiative. There are more people than I can even reasonably name, but there's certainly one person that we need to acknowledge, and that is Professor John Volin. When John first asked me to be on the working group, I was immediately struck by the daunting immensity of this initiative. But then I was also at once very proud that I worked at an institution that would undertake such an effort to transform the lives of 24,000 students. Now, since I just heard about ASU and over 100,000 students, I'm going to say that a little quietly, but that is a really good number. And when John spoke with me about that, I thought, how is that even possible? But I'm so excited that we're going to try to find a way. So simply put, John, we love and appreciate you. And thank you so much for the work that you did here before you moved on. Appreciate you. So my colleagues and I were grateful to be in conversation with you today. As you know, we've all, many of us have been asked to cover a good bit of ground. We tried to put a good bit of that detail in our written information. And so what I hope to provide is a more general overview of our work over the past couple of years. And I'm sure in the Q&A, my colleagues who Tom Katsouleas just named will be a part of adding some detail and maybe some meat on the bones in specific. So just going to share our PowerPoint here. Hope that it all goes well. All right, that's a good start from where I'm sitting at. All right. So a little joke to start out the conversation. My colleagues our intention, we want to share our intention is the Life Transformative Education Initiative at the University of Connecticut prepares students to meet the challenges of the 21st century. And we've brought visionary leaders from all levels of the university together, and we've met to identify best practices, create grassroots bottom-up change, especially cultural change, with a great deal of institutional support. Through a DEI framework, we focused on impacting and the development of every student's identity, agency, and purpose. Now, the impact of COVID-19, I'm sure for all of us, shifted our attention to more short-term measures, maintaining a safe space, maintaining the quality of the education, and experience, university experience that we are delivering. And of course, we continue to do so. But at the end of the day, our hope is that LTE is simply the water that we all swim in. And although some of us, with the kind of gray in their head that I have, although some of us will be able to identify all the tributaries and water byways that we have traveled, we hope to reach a point where the question, when the question is one day asked, what the hell is water? And as Tom so aptly said, and I stole that quote from somebody else, when you ask a person at the University of Connecticut, why are they here? The answer is to transform lives. So the goal of the LTE initiative at the University of Connecticut is to make life transformative education the foundation of our educational philosophy, but not only that, of our experiential philosophy as well. We want to emphasize innovative teaching and support the scaling up of experiential and service learning opportunities, while at the same time leveraging our institutional commitment and support. One of the ways that John started off our conversations here at the University of Connecticut was to make sure that we had both individuals at the administrative level and individuals at the unit level working at the same time, with the hope, of course, to meet in the middle. Some of the areas that you see here in bullets, you see like expanding first year and learning community opportunities, the scope and access of experiential service learning opportunities through a specific DEI lens, so that we make sure accessibility is one of the key areas of focus for us. We'll talk more about embedding LTE guiding principles at the unit level. We're working on that process right now, and certainly we'll need to figure out ways to implement that as we move forward. Connecting the dots. Why connect the dots? A number of reasons, right? So there are so many ways to affect the students' identity, strengthen their agency, and help them illuminate their own purpose. So understanding what we currently have in place across the university is crucial. We want to invest in those spaces, and I heard someone speak about this yesterday. We want to invest in those spaces that are already centered on this work, and at the same time, identify areas where we can put more resources and put more support. And we want to create vehicles for breaking down silos across the university. So it's crucial that we all have an understanding of the work that we are doing. We want to ask ourselves questions like, what happens when we intentionally connect innovative teaching with experiential and service learning initiatives? Service learning initiatives that are real world opportunities, right? What happens when we develop authentic, supportive relationships with students through our student engagement platform, Nexus? What happens when we emphasize long-term well-being, as we just heard the necessary importance from Dr. Santos? What happens when we do that across the university? And also emphasize the role of the university as a necessary member of our larger community, whether that's in the community that we exist in regionally, across the nation, or across the world, right? Not to mention the generational effect that we can have in the lives of students and their families, especially our first-gen students. The diagram that you see in front of you gives a glimpse of our organizational structure for driving new initiatives. Also, it's the ways in which we engage our community members in the LTE initiative. The larger arrows that you see indicate the core team and the working groups and the cycle that we put our initiatives, the development of our initiatives in, and our conversations about how we want to move forward. And the smaller arrows, the ones you see along the bottom, the side, and the top, assessment, communication, and DEI. These identify the focuses that permeate, we hope, permeate all of our work. The rapid response teams that you see on the side help us to refine initiatives, and we also ask them to hack into problems that seem intractable. We're actually engaging that process in the work for our LTE guiding principles. Now, the ad hoc nature of the rapid response groups help us continue to widen our circle of colleagues, the folks that we have involved as personal stakeholders in the work that we are doing, always with an eye to ever expanding concentric circles out to all of our colleagues across the university, faculty, staff, folks who work in facility, and certainly in service of our students. We have always felt that community building events are crucial to socializing this philosophy and practice across the university. With the generous grant support through the CLTE organization consortium, we're able to continue moving forward with both the Cultivate conference at the beginning of, in the fall of 2020, and the LTE speaker series. In the Cultivate conference and breakout workshops, we ask our colleagues to help us think deeply about cultural change, how we facilitate that, how we affect that, how we can be supported in that by our colleagues across the university. And in the LTE speaker series, we're also taking advantage of the folks who we already work with, who are already working deeply in that space. The mid-year, we were also able to engage the LTE champions we derived from the Cultivate conference and the LTE speaker series to train in some mentorship for our students who at some point in time indicated a desire to disconnect from the university, and certainly were not engaged in the processes, of the university. I'm thinking deeply about Dr. Santos' conversations about what we take off the plate, and I so wish that I had heard this conversation while we were in the midst of our academic processes last year. And I think it would have certainly helped us think more deeply about what our students were involved in and how we could better have supported them over the course of that year. In this academic year, we will work with an outside entity to create a strategic plan moving forward for LTE. And we've also asked them to work with us on scaling up 2 existing service learning opportunities in order to create a template, that we then send out to our academic units for them to think deeply about scaling up their own service learning projects, or in the creation of new service and experiential learning projects, how we want to think deeply about accessibility, equanimity, and the size of those programs and how we are accessing students across the university. Last but not least, this clearly is a lot of work. And we've been in conversations with our deans and our department heads to help us identify support systems for our faculty and staff, our colleagues who have joined us as stakeholders in this work, whether it's in the core or the working groups or the rapid response teams. And finally, I have to say, we continue to enjoy strong institutional support. The university's 3 key priorities are doubling research and scholarship, being a powerful engine for the state of Connecticut, and the Life Transformative Education Initiative. All of this to say, the support and focus on LTE will figure significantly in the upcoming strategic planning for the university. What's next at the University of Connecticut? By the end of 2021, we hope to grow our partnerships across our campuses and begin conversations about the best way to embed our LTE guiding principles at the unit level. We hope to have some better understanding of how we support faculty through mechanisms like awards and research dollars attached to those awards, which we think is absolutely crucial to the sustainability of this work. Burning out people and thinking about Dr. Santos's email reply, I think is an important aspect of how we move forward in supporting our faculty who are supporting and staff who are supporting this work. Also, we want to extend our focus on our student engagement platform, Nexus, which actually allows us to connect a community of advisors and mentors and peer mentors around students, which we know will help facilitate authentic, long-lasting relationships. With each initiative, we continue to think about our colleagues who have yet to be directly engaged. And we always think about ways to gather credible baseline data, which while at the same time refining metrics to measure success, and of course, where we are dropping the ball and where we need to move the needle. Although both the Cultivate Conference and the LTE Speaker Series are still operating as a vital space for us, and we continue to engage more and more of our colleagues across the campuses, celebrate our colleagues who are actually doing this work in experiential and service learning. We've been happily surprised by the level of engagement in both these initiatives, especially in the virtual space. And now where we are mixing in-person and virtual opportunities, it's just deeply heartening to see how the university community has been engaged in this conversation with LTE. This also has allowed us to start a conversation with over 140 of our colleagues, over 300 of our colleagues having engaged in the speaker series, and we add more to that every day. And I think it's fair to say the overarching philosophy has become part of the UConn narrative. I was pleasantly surprised in a recent external review of one of our departments, where the reviewers used the LTE framework to assess student and faculty engagement. I will say one of our biggest challenges is creating and scaling up initiatives to support over 24,000 students in an R1 university. And as I mentioned, in supporting our faculty and staff in doing this work. As was mentioned yesterday, we are also thinking deeply, and it is of course not a difficult situation to fix, the dilemma of the flexibility of the LTE guidelines, while at the same time we want to maintain a certain level of consistency and quality across the units. The LTE guidelines are not a step-by-step method for how to create a course or experiential or service learning opportunity for our students. They are indeed large frameworks that we're hoping that folks use in order to step into this particular space to support our students. And so thinking about 3, 4, 5 years down the road, how are we continuing to maintain the level of engagement at LTE that we have at this moment, and the quality of the work and the participation of faculty and staff engaging with our students. I will say that we are incredibly proud of the DI work, the diversity, equity, and engagement, inclusion work, as was mentioned yesterday. And we are extremely proud of our work in this space as it concerns our current initiatives. The LTE speaker series, the internal guests, the invited guests, the makeup of our working groups, the service learning opportunities that we would like to engage in with a focus on inclusion. And we are certainly concerned about using a milieu of assessment tools, such as the CERU, the Student Experience in Research University data, which we will administer on an annual basis, along with student focus groups and internal surveys to continue to gain a deeper understanding of how students are engaging with these initiatives and how they are feeling about their experience at the university. The initiatives that we have listed here are simply part of the work that we feel has and will continue to be instrumental in shifting our culture and practice at UConn. But I would suggest that the word transferability might be too strong of a word. The beauty of this consortium and the conversations that we have been having yesterday and including today keep us all engaged, and it is clear that we all have so much to learn from each other. And to the extent that any of the initiatives that I've talked about today that are bullet points on these slides or as part of the information, written information that we have provided, I'll bet a quarter, because I only bet big money, that each institution that will pull from us and each institution that we will draw from as well will find a way to morph those ideas and initiatives into the vehicle that best supports the work that we are trying to do at our respective institutions. So I really appreciate your time here. I'd like to open up the conversation to our Q&A and invite my co-chairs, Jennifer, Dr. Lise Butts, Professor Tom Scheinfeld, core team members, Dr. Sarah Croucher and Amanda Pitts, if she's with us today, and certainly with Provost Carl Lejwe, if he is with us as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. That's excellent. I think we have about 10 minutes for those questions. So if our IT team could bring us back out of share mode and see the gallery again. You've got that, Michael. Okay, you've got the power. Okay. There's Carl Lejwe. Hello, welcome, Carl. And if you wave and unmute, people can see you. Okay. Let's see. Any questions off the bat for the UConn group? I'll start with one and then let others join in. And I hope I'm not overlooking someone with a raised hand. One of the things we saw yesterday, Michael and team, is how Bates College succeeded by having a balance between giving faculty and staff who engaged in their initiative structure. They have these infusion courses, and there were rules about what those infusion courses had, elements that they had to have in them. At the same time, beyond a few simple rules, which I think might be similar to your guiding principles, the faculty were free to be creative in terms of how they achieved the purposeful work initiative. Can you comment a little bit about what you think must be in the guiding principles so that there is a kind of cohesiveness to the university-wide effort, and it's not just, as I think Brian Olson said yesterday, 24 different projects. What should be in those guiding principles? Could you give us a little feel?
I've done a lot of talking, so I hope I can confer with my colleagues. We'll step into the space, but certainly one of those guiding principles, just to kick us off, is making sure that we are not creating a program that has the ancillary effect of disallowing some folks to participate. So as we think about inclusion, whether it's study abroad or other service learning opportunities out in the real world that have real world application and implications, how are we supporting those students that are financially challenged? How are we supporting those students in internships, right, that cannot afford to take an unpaid internship when we are connecting that to our coursework? And so, although it is a pretty open framework, it is certainly asking all of our faculty and staff and instructors to think deeply about how we make that initiative inclusive so that all students can participate. What are those resources that are necessary?
And I think one of the ways to think about that Michael and I and all of us have talked about is to make sure that we aren't creating more disparities by creating these opportunities so that the student who's working 25 hours a week can't be a part of this emotionally connected, supported opportunity, or the faculty member who is really emotionally connected to students, but an assistant professor and early in her career or his career is now taking on more of this, and that's uncompensated labor, and that creates a different kind of disparity. And so when we think about how we put this into a strategic plan, and I do want to really give Tom Katsouleas a lot of credit. When I came in as provost, and I was a provost somewhere else before, and I always struggled to be really clear what were the university priorities. I think it changed from one time to another, but it never did here. And one of them was always, life transformative education, and that's along one axis. And if you think of our values along the other, diversity, equity, and inclusion, the equity part, not creating those disparities, force us when we create those initiatives that we're asking ourselves, is this going to create unintended consequences for some faculty? Will this create unintended consequences or even greater gaps for some students? So just wanted to add that on to what Michael shared, because we're really trying to be intentional about that.
I'll add one quick other element. I think for us, we knew that life transformative work was happening at UConn. It's happened lots of places. It was happening before we started this initiative. And so it wasn't the question of what or how, it's really the why. And I think this is the important part about the guiding principles and how they're going to come forward in these conversations, that that everyone at UConn needs to be on board with the why, and not just how can I fit what I'm doing now into this thing that the university is saying is important, but why these guiding principles? Why are these the things that we are all agreeing to as a community, every member of our community, to advancing? You know, that's the part that I think LTE brings that maybe wasn't there prior to.
Tom, you're on mute.
I got auto muted. I'm sorry. We have a question from Nicole, my new buddy from the breakout session from Wake Forest. Go for it, Nicole.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I love the work that you're doing. And as a quantitative methodologist, I always really appreciate seeing a mixture of qualitative work and quantitative work. I really think you need them both. So I love hearing that you're doing focus groups and assessments. And one of the things that I've learned over the years is that assessment work tends to oversample, particularly for white women. And I'm wondering if you have had any strategies for making sure in your focus groups and your assessment work that you're really getting inclusive samples so you can get the best information possible.
Do you want me to answer? So
you're the best to answer that.
Yeah. So first of all, on our survey data, like we can weight that according to our student population. So we're using this series, which is the student experience in the research experience, the student experience in the research university survey, which is benchmarked against other peer institutions. And it's also like the data that we have access to is weighted according to population. And what we actually have so far is a pretty representative sample of our students across the university. And then we're able to dig down into school and college, and we can look at within different demographics within those students, whether that's by class standing, whether that's by race or ethnicity, gender, and actually also understand like the differences that are happening in there. So we have a really robust data set from that survey that I think we're excited to work with as our baseline. And not only that, because it's a benchmark survey, we can also look at how we're doing relative to other institutions. So as our starting point for that kind of big baseline data, first of all, on those big measures, it gives us a sense around like well-being measures, how often students are reporting that they have the opportunity to engage in experiential learning, how much they're reporting that they have strong relationships with their professors or with other staff at the university. Like it gives us a chance to kind of see how we're doing relative to our peers, how are we doing right now, and how are we doing within different student groups. And then as we start to get a sense of that big data, what we want to go and do is target our focus groups around questions that arise out of that. So if we see, for instance, that we have issues with connection between professors and male underrepresented minority students, then we'll try and build a focus group around that question, right? To start to drill down and understand into what's going on there. We have a really great assessment team. It has one of our professors, a head of institutional assessment, I kind of drift around on the periphery, and then we have a couple of graduate GAs as well that are supporting those efforts. So we have a really good team in place to kind of build that out from the start. And then we're going to administer that survey annually so we can see how those broad metrics change. And then again, kind of look at where we need to really dig in and do our focus groups to follow up on that so that we are tracking it along and then being responsive to it, right?
And one other thing we did early on Well, so our chief diversity officer at the university at many places reports to the president, but we asked the chief diversity officer to be part of our leadership team. So he's in our meetings every week where we talk about what is our strategy. Just to give a quick example, when we were thinking about COVID and students who were taking in-person classes, he was the person who said, wait, but are we looking at this across different groups? And we found it wasn't the same. Now, hopefully over time when this works, he's not the only person always asking us to think about that, but certainly getting us to keep asking those questions on top of all that Sarah just talked about. I also think in our leadership team, keep coming back to, okay, but how might we be getting this wrong in ways like you suggested? And I think we're getting smarter because of making sure we have that influence in all the academic things we're doing.
Great. I think we have time for maybe just one more question, and then we'll close the session if anyone has a final thought. And if not, I'm going to ask Tom Scheinfeld. He joined us. He's a professor in the digital media design program and a thought leader at the university in pedagogy and teaching. And there's a program joint between the School of Fine Arts and the School of Engineering. Tom, how does life transformative education impact at the level of your department, say?
Sure. So we are one of those departments where we're trying to embed these principles. I think there's been at UConn, I think a top down and a bottom up approach. I think, we at the beginning of the session talked about how it's, how can we prevent this from just being, a bunch of isolated initiatives. And I think that's we need to do that. At the same time, it's always going to be something that is happening at the local level. So what we want is we want a lot of isolated initiatives, but that are stitched together through larger structures. So we have some robust experiential outside the classroom learning opportunities for our students. We're working on advising and mentoring, but we're using some of the structures that that broader LTE program has set up. So for instance, we're implementing the Nexus platform across our student advising within the department. That's been something that's been happening just in the past year since the LTE initiative has taken root. Another thing is the universities, and another one of those structures that we're trying to integrate with is the universities. At the same time as we're working on LTE, we're working on a new implementation of our general education curriculum. And in that new curriculum, there will be an integrative experience that will try to integrate all the areas of the students' general education together in a kind of capstone experience. And so we in our department, with seeing that coming down the line, are tapping into that structure to rethink our capstone experiences, both for our BFA students, our BA students, and even it's spurring thought about what should our thesis experience for our MFA students and our MA students look like. So having the broader conversation, the broader structures, I think is helping to jumpstart some of our more local initiatives at the department level.
Terrific. That really is helpful. Gigi, I heard your hand was up. I didn't see it. So did you have something quick that you wanted to ask?
Sure. I was going back and forth in the chat with Jen. It was really about, the faculty buy-in. So Tom S. actually partially answered it. So, we faculty get cranky about some of this stuff if we feel like we didn't initiate it. Let's just be real. We're both at large institutions. Tom K used to be at our institution. So he knows how it is from various perspectives. Just wondering, what have you built in proactively to handle faculty that might be cranky about not wanting to do something that wasn't their initiative, and and so I see that at the department level, some of that's going on, but I'm just curious because we're both really large institutions, and that means building consensus is much more challenging.
I will say that we are somewhat new at really kind of weaving in a lot of the things we have been talking about at the faculty level. I think we tried to get ahead of that at the Cultivate conference and in our working groups by creating what we have been calling Cultivate Champions that then go back out into their departments and begin to socialize some of these particular ideas. We hope at the end of this semester to start socializing how we implement the ways and the best way to do it, because the last thing that we want is for faculty and staff and instructors to feel like we are imposing a whole nother level of just thought about how they need to approach their work in the classroom. And so one of the reasons why we spend a lot of time thinking about what we already have in place is because we can lean on that, I think, moving forward, that there is so much of this already happening across the university that we are not coming up with anything new per se. We are just trying to create a new way to think about what are the synergies, when we think about all of this programming and initiatives together. And when we lay the philosophy of LTE over top of that, how do we start to break down silos? How do we start to collaborate? How do we start to have interdisciplinary work that is driven because we now know what each other is doing? And I think I'm leaning on the fact that I just believe faculty want to support students in the best way that we can, and that we've done some of the advanced work to put us in a good place. Someone will say, no, thank you. I mean, that's just the nature of where we live. But I think on the whole, I'm feeling good about the level of advanced planning that we've done.
Terrific, and thank you so much for clarifying.
Thank you to the audience for those great questions, and thank you to the presenters really sharing your experience and insights. I think it's been very valuable. Really appreciate it. Turn it back over to you. I think it's Keith and maybe Gilda.
Yes, thank you, Tom. Actually, me and Rick at this point. So just a couple of logistical bits and pieces for the next hour. We have 2 sessions coming up. We're going to have 2 parallel sessions of presentations from institutions that have been part of the CLTE. We will set those 2 up as breakouts. So you will have the opportunity to choose which of the 2 sessions you would like to get into. The speakers will go into their own, of course. And then participants, attendees can go into whichever of the 2 that they would like. It will be the full 60 minutes. At the end of the 60 minutes, we will come back together. The breakout rooms will close. We'll come back to the main session. We'll then have a chance to ask further questions. We're actually then going to be setting up 12 breakout rooms in total of all the presentations, except one for one person who can't actually be here for the additional time, so that you can talk to the presenters, ask more questions, engage with them, give them gifts about what they were talking about, or things that you were intrigued about for their presentations, or things that you thought they might like to learn about your own experiences. I'm now going to turn the mic over to Rick Miller, who's going to say a little bit about the 2 moderators that we have for each of the sessions before we actually open up the breakout rooms.
Thanks, Keith. Since we're running a little behind, I'm going to be unfortunately brief. I could say a lot about these 2 people that we are so fortunate to have. One of them is President Gilda Barabino, who is the president of Olin College of Engineering. She's a member of practically every society you can think of, including the National Academy of Engineering, National Academy of Medicine. She's also the incoming president of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. So Gilda, thank you so much for making time to do this today. Really appreciate it. I also want to welcome Archie Holmes today. Archie is I believe his new title is he's Executive Vice Chancellor of Academic Affairs at the University of Texas System. We seem to have a sort of a competition for who has more students these days. So apparently the UT system enrolls 220,000 students, has 59,000 graduates each year, and an aggregate budget of 6.7 billion. So I don't know who will follow you, Archie, but this is a pretty high bar to try to exceed. So thank you both for taking time today to moderate these 2 sessions. And I'm going to ask Keith now to instruct us how we get to these new 2 breakouts.